Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got a note from a viewer cryptically named R, the letter R. Couple burglarizes home, contacts victims to request password to unlock stolen computer. This is from K105.com. K105 is a radio station. And I'm fascinated by stories about how people get caught. I did a story about a week ago about the guy who got caught littering, and he'd been on the run from the police for years. If he hadn't littered, he wouldn't have gotten caught. But this one might be a new level of I don't know what to call this, but the allegation is this. 2 people burglarized a residence and then later contacted the victims hoping to get the passwords to the electronics that were stolen in the burglary. The Paintsville Police Department arrested 2 people of Paintsville after they broke into a home and stole electronics, business bank cards, computers, and household items, according to a report by WYMT.com. Over $1,000 was charged to the bank cards, and then soon after, the victims began receiving messages from a person who said that they had bought one of the victims' stolen computers on Facebook Marketplace and requested to meet the victim so they could provide a password to unlock the computer. But the fascinating thing about that concept, think about this. Someone buys a computer off of Facebook Marketplace and goes, oh, I can't get into it. I think I'll call the person it was stolen from. Like, that wouldn't make sense. Now, if they said, well, we bought it from somebody you sold it to, but the people whose computer was stolen would know they hadn't sold it. And I've mentioned this before, and this is something that people need a refresher on once in a while, is that if I sell you something, here, you want to buy my Superbird? if you want to buy this from me and I say, I will sell this to you, the presumption is that I own it. I cannot sell you something I do not own. Okay? So when I say to you, would you like to buy this? I don't need to say, and I own it. It's presumed I own it because I'm offering it to you for sale. I couldn't sell it to you if I didn't own it. And that's called a warranty of title. And that is a real thing. It exists in the Uniform Commercial Code, which means that it's going to be the law in all 50 states. And if I go to sell you something, I have to own it. So if somebody's on Facebook Marketplace and they say that they are going to sell you something, presumably they own it. So how did somebody buy something from Facebook Marketplace and go, but someone else has the passwords to it? That should be a tip-off that the person selling it didn't own it. Now, that was a made-up story. That wasn't true. But my point is that even if it was true, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. So one of the victims met the couple at a hotel, and police stood by to see what would happen. So officers made contact with the couple, got ID from one of them, and then when she opened the door to the motel to retrieve it, the police then observed things in plain view which were illegal. Now, the plain view doctrine is a concept that it's an exception to a situation where a police officer would need a warrant. So let's suppose there's a hotel room or a motel room, and there's contraband inside the motel room. And the police suspect there's contraband in there. Okay? Well, if they show up and the door is locked and the drapes are drawn and they don't know what's in there, but they have good reason to believe that something is in there, they can go and try to get a search warrant and convince someone to sign a search warrant that we've got good reason to go in there. Here's why. Boom, boom, boom. Attach an affidavit and get a search warrant to go in. However, the plain view doctrine says that if law enforcement can see something with their own eyes and it's just right there and it doesn't require anything other than me looking at it, well, then I don't need a warrant. Can you imagine you've got to go get a warrant? I saw it. It was right there. Oh, that's an unreasonable search without a warrant. Now, of course, that's perfectly reasonable. You expect that people can look around and see things with their eyes. So The woman opened the door to the hotel room. Police officer looked in and saw contraband. Now, I've had this discussion before, as some of my oldest, longest viewers would remember, about what a police officer could actually see from the door or the window looking in someplace. But here, the presumption is that when looking in, saw things in plain view that were contraband. So, believe it or not, officers still obtained and executed a search warrant on the motel room and discovered stuff, along with a check written to the victims that had been altered and signed by one of them, along with several other items stolen from the residence. Now, you might say, Steve, why did they get a search warrant? Well, this is an interesting case, because if they have the two people here and they get them out of the room and they saw one thing in that room, you close the door, you go get a search warrant so these two people can't get back in there and dispose of stuff, and you can detain them for the time being. And you say in your search warrant, we saw one item of contraband. We think there's more. However, I believe they could have said, plain view, I see that, and gone in and then seen everything else. But they were playing it safe. And I'd rather see them play it safe in a situation where the evidence isn't going to disappear. So they did a good job on that. So they executed the warrant, went in, found what they saw to confirm that. That's always good. And then found a check that had been altered, but also other stolen items. So a public safety director from Paintsville told WYMT, it is very unusual for someone to contact the person they robbed to request a password. But it worked out really good, and they're in jail. Now, the first person was charged with third-degree burglary, possession of a controlled substance, criminal possession of a forged instrument, public intoxication, identity theft, and receiving stolen property, more than 1,000, less than 10,000. And the other person, interestingly enough, it was the woman who opened the motel room door, was only charged apparently with a failure to appear, but they can always amend that later. So both suspects lodged in the Big Sandy Regional Detention Center. And one of the things that's always bugged me about people who steal stuff is quite often they steal stuff that's not useful to them. And I may have mentioned this one before, but years and years and years ago, I had one of those Sirius satellite receivers that you simply suction cup the window of the car, you put an antenna on the roof, you plug it into the cigarette lighter. And I actually wired mine in nice, so the wiring was kind of hidden. And it was right when Sirius Satellite, they hadn't yet merged with XM, but they would do that shortly. So this is a long time ago. And I had that thing in my car. It was there for years. And one day, somebody came into my office and said, hey, someone just broke into a bunch of cars down in the parking lot. And so I go down there, and somebody had smashed the passenger window of one of my Ford Explorers. It smashed the passenger window, climbed in, grabbed the Sirius satellite receiver, and ripped it from its mount. And in doing so, had ripped out some of the cabling, and they'd taken just that receiver. It's the only thing it took from my car. So now they've caused all the damage of the broken window, and they've stolen a receiver, and I walked inside and shut the receiver off. The receiver for Sirius is like a cable box. Stealing a cable box won't do you a lot of good. So you walk into a pawn shop, presumably, and you've got this satellite receiver without the cables or cords, because those are left behind, and all you've got is just the receiver, and it's a couple of years old. And you go, how much you want? How much you give me for that? And they look at it and they go, nothing. We're not going to pay you for that thing. It doesn't even have all the cords. We need the cords. Where are the cords? And it was not an expensive unit. That window cost more than the Sirius satellite receiver. Now, I know some people are going to say, but Steve, you're looking at this wrong. From the thief's viewpoint, that window cost him nothing, and if he can get anything for the Sirius satellite receiver, he's going to come out ahead. Think about the risk you take breaking into cars during daylight hours and stealing stuff that's of such little value that you might get nothing for it, but you run the risk of getting caught. And so someone who's living their life on that edge is probably going to get caught sooner rather than later. Now, I never heard again from anybody who had my Sirius satellite receiver. I suspect that somebody realized, oh, it's worthless, and just threw it away. So the window in my truck got busted for nothing. And like I said, and I've said this before, it's wasteful. It's wasteful. So was I ticked off that this happened? Of course I was. But I also looked at it and said, from a larger viewpoint, it's wasteful. It's just stupid. It's stupid. And I've heard of many examples of people who said, house got broken into, a car got broken into, the garage got broken into, and they caused more damage breaking in than the value of what they stole. And it's just shameful. So here, though, the people got caught because they stole a computer with a password on it. They couldn't get around the password, so they tried to think of some way to get the password from the people who owned the computer, who, of course, would have a password, but also realize that, hey, the people who've stolen my computer are now calling to ask for a password. So there you go. So couple burglarizes home, contacts victims to request password to unlock the computer they stole. That's from K105.com. And R, the letter R, sent it. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. You can't teach a new mouse old clicks.